Hi everyone, and thanks for. I'm jumping in now. Should I be? Hi everyone, and thanks for coming out. I thought maybe a bit of housekeeping first. We could talk about the show and the title. And
Yeah.
is that okay?
Yeah. Afternoon Pieces. The work here is created over the last 2 years, the title, it was in the 2 years after I had my son, and it kind of marked a sort of change in process for me, because when I had my son, my time was much more limited, my studio time. Like before, where my practice was just oil painting, I would have like long periods. I could work in the studio, and I had quite an experimental practice, and I could, work over different processes, use the paint in different ways, and I was kind of really deep into it. But of course, that all changed once I had my boy, and I would kind of get periods of 2 hours during the nap time, and or like maybe 2 hours in the evening time, and like trying to kind of get back into that sort of oil painting practice where I'm really involved. It was just impossible, like considering the way I work as well. So I was kind of like, what am I going to do about this? And I knew I had a show coming up that I had to work for, so there was, a desire, but also an imperative to kind of get working again. I just sort of in the studio, I noticed these kind of two paintings lying against each other, and I thought that they're paintings I'd painted before, and I thought that they would look good collaged, and so I tore them up and just kind of began rearranging, and I just got a real kick out of it. I felt really energized, and I kind of thought that this is a way forward for me now, that I could do this type of work and things could come together in a much more quick or more sort of energetic way. And so that's just begun this whole process of collaging, working things out, cutting things up, also adding new elements, also switching to acrylic paint, which is kind of faster drying and more practical for the stuff I wanted to do. And just stapling things together. And then I kind of got into stitching them because, the canvas is really nice to stitch, and it sort of makes sense almost because canvas is a fabric, and, it was a nice way to kind of like attach things together. So, but that's like loosely where the title is based, Afternoon Pieces, is that I was kind of restricted to these weird sort of afternoons, 2 hours at a time, and maybe the evening time as well. But afternoon kind of encapsulates the whole limited studio. What can I do? And just sort of making the most of my limitations, I guess.
Do you feel like stolen time, or like little chunks of time that you were able to get in?
Yeah, it was little chunks. I mean, particularly, in the first, for the first year, obviously I wasn't much in the studio, but the kind of a second year, it was just like little bits of time. It's getting easier now because he's in creche and grandparents have been very good, and I'm starting to get a more steady practice in a way. But yeah.
Well, we'd spoken before about the value of time and the necessity maybe to waste time in the studio, and it's all very, like, you can be very indulgent, or maybe you need to be very indulgent. I think we'd kind of both agree on that, but then I think where there's a will, there's a way. When it has to be done in little snippets of time, it gets done, but it has an impact. And like, maybe we'll touch on it later when we're talking, when we're really getting into the studio, but it's a broken, collage is a broken medium, and the time is broken up, and it's kind of fitting and natural that you would reach for that. Kind of one thing that's quicker than even painting with acrylics is finding a piece that's already painted with acrylic and using it.
Using it, yeah.
So I had a couple of things that I was hoping to read as starting points for us to talk about. And I was also going to invite anyone from the audience to kind of take part in that conversation as we went along instead of necessarily wait until the end. So I'll remind you of all of that, and if you have anything to add or anything that needs clarifying. And an artist that you mentioned yourself in the press release, I think, is Winifred Nicholson, who's a British painter who died in the early 80s, kind of British modernist. And I just wanted to read something written about her and maybe her relationship to colour and what kind of happened with her work in terms of colour. So the intimate and discomforting processes of things. Oh, sorry, I'm reading from the wrong bit, of course. This makes more sense. My apologies, everyone. The arithmetic of abstraction alone seemed to solve her, Winifred's, problem of colour. She was soon brought to regard colour no longer as an accessory characteristic of form, but rather as an individual element fully expressing itself in terms of vibration or music. In holding that colour loses its significance in being tied down to form, Winifred Nicholson took to painting shapes of colour as removed from shapes of form. This study of colour had a marked effect on her and the type of flower pictures that she had been accustomed to painting. She now abandoned the forms and sensitive impressionism of her flower paintings and turned to a more significant, more clearly and structurally defined use of colour in the interpretation of her landscapes and flower pieces. And I think like that bit about she chose to paint forms of colour is kind of the important thing, and something that you mentioned in our chat the other day.
Yeah. Yeah, I came across her painting like at the back of like a Homes and Gardens magazine, and I was just struck by it straight away because it like had this like red flower pot and this kind of brown soil and green, and it was set in this kind of grey, black kind of, I don't know, shadows, and it's kind of a little bit abstract, also figurative, but I just thought the colour was so vibrant, and I was like, oh God, I have to see more of her work. So I kind of found it hard to find information on her. I went actually to NCAD Library, they had a book on her work. So I looked some more, and then I actually I really knew I wanted to see her paintings in real life, and I figured out that she was having an exhibition in England somewhere, and it was, I don't know if it was a retrospective, but it was quite a large body of work they were showing in an art centre, and I went over and I was just immediately struck by the colour of her paintings, and I just felt that like, God, these look different. There's a real sense of light about them, and it's like, it's like the gallery lights didn't need to be on. These paintings had their own sort of light source, and it was because she kind of worked out her contrasts through colour rather than light and dark, which you would if you were concentrating on form. So you had these colours of like different colours of similar value, like similar level of brightness, and that's what was giving the luminosity to the paintings. And I was just kind of, I was just sort of astounded in a way, because she had kind of, it's a very, I don't know, it was just very kind of specific colour language going on. And they were sort of representational, but kind of very abstract at the same time. And I think that was through the use of colour. And yeah, it was just a real sense of atmosphere and light off them. And like a lot of her paintings, she'd have like a flower pot on the window ledge with a landscape in the back. But it was like you could kind of feel the breeze off them in a way. Like they were just really, I felt they're really special. And so I was kind of thinking, Jesus, I need to think more about colour now. After seeing those paintings, I was like, you know, yeah, just sort of prompted me to consider colour a bit more deeply than probably I had been. You know, and still, I would think I've a lot more work to do as well. But yeah, it was just, yeah, you could say there was a real sort of kind of intelligent colour language about her work. And that was very appealing.
You kind of allude to that in the piece you wrote for the kind of press release.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of talking about choosing that code, no, that's too obvious or that's too easy.
Yeah, because I think like, I mean, I can fall into the trap of I'm making a painting and, you know, the colours are nice, but maybe I need a bit more contrast. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll add a bit of black, you know, and I'm like, you know, that'll kind of throw up the contrast. And it's like, no, that's also being a bit like lazy about it, you know, think about what's going to throw up a contrast with the colours you're using, you know. So, yeah, so like, yeah, in a way it did make me kind of consider colour more for sure. Yeah, looking at her work. And I was glad to see them in real life because I don't think the books really do it justice, her paintings. So yeah, I was glad to kind of make the trip.
There's an implication in the piece I read out, and also in an interview you gave where for her, and I'm suggesting for you, there's a hierarchy of concerns, and subject matter or form, them being similar, are down on the list of the pecking order, you know, and the colour is more important.
Like, yeah, for me, yes, like, as I kind of, when I'm thinking about things I like or what I'm attracted to, it's probably the colour first that sort of grabs me. And even when I'm in the studio and I'm figuring out new pieces, and I have a messy studio, so I can sort of make connections between different things that I wouldn't normally put together. So like I could have a pile of paintings off stretchers, and then I could have a pile of like swatches of stuff I've been painting on, or, you know, bits of paper, bits of whatever. And it's the connections are through colour really for me. Like, it's like, that's what kind of excites me. And we'll, you know, that's the kind of first thing. And then it's all the other things after that. Yeah, I guess so.
I'm about to maybe read something else, but if anyone had anything about colour or questions or in relation to anything that's been said so far, feel free to jump in.
I think there is a very, like, not obvious but sophisticated kind of use of colour that you have, which is like the green painted here, like the vibrancy, and what you were saying there, the light is fantastic, yeah. But I love the title of the pieces, you know, or the show, Afternoon Pieces, because, you know, that saying, the pleasure of a preoccupied being. Did you really enjoy, like, did you get fully into, sort of absorbed in making them?
Yeah, I did get absorbed in making them. Like, particularly the stitching, because it's kind of meditative in a way. Yeah. So yeah, which is kind of different from my painting process, which is, you know, a lot more sort of energetic. It's more of a faster pace. Like, so I had to really slow down for stitching, and also because I wasn't really good at it at the start. So it was like, if I wanted to get more straighter lines, it would take a bit of consideration, you know, to do that. Yeah, like, but yeah, like I'd find myself kind of getting lost in it in a way, for sure.
There is that sense, and
like,
there's sort of these, you know, tips of beauty, you know, that stand out, and you know, and yet it's sort of quite sophisticated and quite complex because it kind of works, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I did, yeah, definitely enjoy like moments with the stitching. But there's also moments of frustration though as well, like where I'd just kind of get like bored with it in a way, because it was just like it would be kind of I could be sitting there for 2 hours like stitching a piece, and like okay, I've got to do something else now. Or that would actually give me the urge to go and paint, you know. So in a way, in a kind of roundabout way, the stitching brought me back to painting again, because I love the stitching, but I also love painting, and that kind of made me, you know, want to paint even more, because I don't want to be sitting down stitching all the time, you know. So in a way, the painting was quite daunting in the beginning, but then it became something of a release, you know. So
layered process, because when something gets too hard, there is a tendency sometimes to bolt, but if you have something else to go back to,
yeah, exactly.
jump from one thing to another.
Yeah, and it was that variety was kind of was really working. Yeah.
The jumping back and forth is another broken thing, a broken practice. And,
Yeah.
I'll drag you away from painting though, back to collage, because the apparent, you know, the apparent, you know, the lack of very standard approaches to colour and colour relationships that we're alluding to in Winfred's work and that we're alluding to here in the gallery is, even objectively, is probably a result of welcoming and embracing collage. So when you're finding things and putting them together, you're consciously not mixing those colours.
Yeah.
And it's a great benefit in what I do when I find things. It's like I never would have mixed that to put it with this, but by finding it, everything starts to become a little less predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll dwell on the next point a little bit less, but you and I spoke recently and we talked about a quote, and I'm going to kind of pass it over to you because I could go anywhere with it. This is a quote by Leo Steinberg about describing Matisse's painting practice in general, a specific painting, and the use of colour. At one point, in other criteria, Steinberg, that's Leo Steinberg, describes looking at Matisse's famous painting, The Joy of Life, in the following terms: it is somewhat like watching a stone drop into water. Your eye follows the expanding circles, and it takes a deliberate, almost perverse effort of will to keep focusing on the point of first impact, perhaps because it is so unrewarding. Here Steinberg conveys the almost dizzying effect of looking at Matisse's all over fields of pulsating colour. And there's more to that, but that's the important bit. And now I can't quite remember exactly why. It's always lovely to think about ripples of water and expanding ideas and stuff, but I can't remember exactly why we've been talking about it.
Yeah. That quote it's at the start of an Yves Alain Bois essay I wrote, or not I wrote, Jesus, I read. I wish I wrote it, I don't know. But I read while I was doing my master's, and I was looking at a lot of Matisse paintings at the time, and because I was interested in his, you know, his colour, but also his compositions as well. And that essay, that quote actually, what it's describing is the sense of movement in the Matisse painting, where you go up and look at it, or areas, maybe you're kind of enticed into a specific area, but your kind of eye is kind of pulled in another direction, and there's kind of a lack of detail. There's a kind of, I don't know, there's a seduction to look, but there's a lack of detail, so you're moving on and you're kind of going around the whole canvas. And it's the sensation of movement that he's creating, where your eye is just like, it's kind of all over the place. It's that sort of, the kind of dance between focused and unfocused gaze, and that's kind of creating a rhythm within the work. And I just found that whole idea very appealing, because it kind of made me think of the whole like when I'm working on the painting, the whole surface. It's like, what's it doing? Like, you know, I don't necessarily want the eye to be locked too much on a specific area. I like that sense of rhythm, sense of movement, and it kind of keeps the painting in the present tense in a way. It's like there's an activity to it, and I just found that idea very interesting, and sort of made me think about my own work and how to consider movement and to not really overemphasize any area. It's like maybe to almost reduce the painting language a little bit, so that allows for more space to kind of engage with the whole painting. So you're not sort of locked on specific details.
Yeah, I suppose when you're laying pieces down and deciding where they end up living, or even if you're stitching and making things more permanent. But even in the paintings that have no collage elements, I mean, they're full of all the things one uses to move your eye around the painting and to create movement across the surface. Yeah. Is that something maybe anyone has any questions about before we go on?
Just like I kind of also share that sense of like kind of not non-specificity, but like kind of the eye moving around and a lack of maybe emphasis or, you know, strong declaration, whatever. I was wondering, for you, does that like touch on the issue of self-expression at all? Because for me, there's kind of a sense of reticence about your work almost, and I don't know if that's something that you relate to, or how does what we said relate to the idea of self-expression?
So the idea of movement as being part of self-expression, is it? Or?
I guess like if there's a lack or just an absence rather than a lack of like an explicit or like emphasized figure.
Yeah.
It feels like there's nothing being emphasized in terms of statement of self or anything. Anyway, it's kind of the connection in my head because I feel kind of sort of a quietness or a reticence or something about your work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do like I suppose I'm more about creating sensations with the work, which is maybe what's coming across when you say quietness, rather than getting into a plot or a narrative. They are about kind of like mood and sensation and feeling and maybe a quality. So I don't know if that answers the question or...
It does somewhat, I guess. Yeah, I guess I haven't answered really. I guess it did. You consider that they are expressing, but just maybe not in a very figurative way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but the whole thing of just not getting too much, like especially figures, maybe not one over there, you know, there's a holding back, and that's a really difficult thing to do, isn't it? Sometimes just maybe want to give more, but there's a feeling.
But there's I mean, I do, I do kind of come up against those, like, you know, could I push this further? But I kind of say to myself, if you can see it, it's already there in a way. Like, you know, it's, it's maybe just there's probably that holding back, as you say. You know, there is a reticence maybe. But I think that leads to maybe a more kind of openness, like if it's not too specific.
Maybe there's a connection between what we're getting to about purpose or and your potential reticence there in this last thing I want to talk about. So I shared with you an article today, a text written by Amy Silmans, and it is called, what is it called? It's called
Shit Happens.
Shit Happens, Notes on Awkwardness. And I wanted to read a couple of bits from it briefly, but in order to give context, generally speaking, my subjective take on the text is that it's a way of putting forward Amy Silman's opposition to simplistic ideas about beauty and creating beauty, and being maybe right or perfect in some way in the work, or achieving something that is, I don't know, that is polished, perfect, that denies the crapness and awkwardness and wrongness and disorganization of real life. And in the essay, for example, quotes from the essay are, attractiveness is the enemy. She talks about being invited to panels in the 90s, I think, to discuss beauty. And, at some point in the panel discussion, just through frustration with the conversation, she kind of found herself blurting out that I couldn't give a shit about beauty, and that clearly leading up to this is an emphasis on something else, or an interest in something else. So she talks a lot about the body and a relationship between the body and the work, and the wrongness and imperfections of a body, and the wrongness and potential imperfections in our work. And she says in the digital age, the relationship is the relationship between the mechanical and the body. The relationship, this relationship also goes the other way around. The living weight of the body is encrusted like a barnacle upon the perfection of the algorithm. Just having a body is a daily comedy. From the control tower of the head, one gazes downward, always downward, upon this loose, baggy monster that we find ourselves in. This laughable casement that is the body below, as ankles swell, farts are emitted, rolls of fat jut out, the penis does its own thing, full stop, shit happens and then you die. And it's kind of very amusing bit of text, but in it she's, I reckon, referring, because she does so later in the text, to this act of looking down at your wrongness and your lack of perfection and acknowledging it, is alluding in the text to the way we look at our work, the way we look down. Now, I'm inclined to look down at work and make everything on the ground usually, so I'm already in that headspace, but she's clearly talking about assessing work as well, and so maybe I'll finish up, because maybe we're going to run out of time. And so we've got looking down at the making, and I kind of hope this would bring us to how we make things and how your studio works, because there's a lot here that I think rings true with what I imagine your studio is like. So the intimate and discomforting process of things changing as they go awry, and as they look uncomfortable and have to be confronted, repaired, or risked, i.e. the process of trying to figure something out while doing it. I don't know if that's abstraction, but I know it's awkward. Finding a form is building these feelings into a substance. This is a very fragile thing to do. And I suppose I'm bringing that up and talking about it because I'm thinking about this act of working stuff out as you're doing it, not working to a plan, piecing things together, assessing how potentially imperfect it all is, and what you're making it out of is. It's broken bits.
Yeah.
It's bits you've destroyed previously. And even if we make something, and I think you do make something very weirdly right, but definitely interesting. More interesting than right, actually, and it just rang true with what I'd imagine the studio feels like for you,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there is, I guess, a sense of, awkwardness. I mean, like, well, like a sense of it being a bit true to life in its awkwardness, as the article was about. That, yeah, like life and our bodies are awkward, and that's okay to show in the work, and maybe to reflect a little bit of that. Yeah, I mean, like, probably Amy takes it a step further, and she's quite into that sort of awkward, kind of brutal, like, I like a bit of awkwardness. I don't know if I'm fully down with the kind of
fully committed.
Brutality stuff. And like, I mean, actually, her painting in the article was quite nice, so I'm sure she likes a bit of attractiveness as well, to some degree. But I get what she's saying for sure, and it's like, it's awkward in general to make. Like, there's a lot of like minor decision makings, especially like working in this way. Everything has a level of decision to it that probably a more intuitive painting process. Yeah, it's just different. So yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this even like I'm thinking of the title piece, Afternoon Pieces. Even stretching that was very awkward.
I think I'm very fond of that text in general that I've read from, but if I have one criticism of it, the word awkward is problematic. And I think when she uses it, I just imagine what she's really saying instead of the word awkward is not perfect.
Yeah, not perfect, yeah.
And when I do that and we replace that, it all starts to make more sense. Because we have too much baggage with that word, and even though she goes to great length to explain what she means by it, it's still a problematic word,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even in concrete, objective terms, we can talk about all the things that aren't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So your stitching is immaculate where you want it to be, but it finishes and it stops and it doesn't go all the way, and there's all sorts of lifted up edges. In fact, earlier when I was in the gallery for an additional view of the work, I found myself whistling a tune, and I realised as I was whistling, I was blowing bits of your paintings around. So, there's threads hanging out, there's bits poking out. It's not all pinned down and resolved and perfect. And with that comes, brilliant things as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I kind of brought that into the talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I didn't want everything wrapped up and, like, so it's important to have that level of unfinishedness. Yeah, definitely. And even to keep the assembly of them sort of as they were, kind of like, even the one with the snowdrops kind of came together quite quickly, and I kind of wanted to keep that sense of it just happening, like, even though there's kind of stitching or whatever, but I knew if I kind of went into it too much, and I could have gone into it a lot further, it would have maybe just kind of taken away from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Amy Silver, when she talks about colour, she talks about being open to happy accidents.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I think that work here.
Yeah, that's another connection. Amy Silver talking about happy accidents, with colour.
Yeah.
That's another, and we've already referred to that, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else about that stuff? For anyone else here?
I think the work has a nice sense of wholeness about it, rather than perfection. There's sort of everything in it, and it gives it a nice feel about it, and that it's very whole.
Thank you.
At the risk for the tape, I'll repeat that, but there's a sense of wholeness about the work as opposed to perfection.
Yeah.
And the irony, and I agree with you, and the irony of that is it's actually got holes in it that make it incomplete. And it's got corners that don't match up and corners that are missing and stuff. So I totally agree with you, but isn't it interesting at the same time that it's kind of not, not resolved in a weird way. Is there something else, or will we leave it there?
I think we might leave it there.
Okay.
Unless there's more questions.
Are there any other questions or things that we didn't talk about that people would like to ask? Nothing to do with anything I may have read?
Can I ask, just for all of them, do you work on the unstretched and then decide afterwards what you stretch and what you...
Yeah, like for a lot of them, well, let me see. Well, there's certainly the two of them on this wall would have been unstretched. So the afternoon pieces and then medieval strategies like would have been initially unstretched, and then I stretched them. And some of them are not on stretchers; they're just stapled to the wall. So it's kind of a combination. And that mid-zones, that was actually a stretch canvas, and I just stitched into it. I think unstretching, working them on the stretch it's easier in a way. I'm not kind of restricted by the stretcher, but it's only when I decide that I'd like to stretch this that I'll do that then.
So when something like that is already stretched, then sometimes the edge is the frustration of the limitation of that is when you maybe add on something, is it?
Like add on. Yeah, I mean, so say after I stretch that I would add more to kind of maybe expand it out. I guess so, because when I stretched that onto the stretcher, I knew I kind of wanted, there was that hole in it, which I really liked and was, happy with it. But then I was thinking maybe add in the netting to give it another, almost like a drawing at the back of it, maybe, certainly decisions happen after the stretching as well.
I think in this work you can see just an openness to how anything might get made or built, or as you're alluding to in your question, grown from a stretcher. I remember, it was good few years ago now, but I remember thinking to myself, or having a revelation in the studio going, there's nothing I can't do to this thing to break it, or that will inhibit it in any way. I can add on to it, I can cut bits away, I can make it thinner, longer, And that only came with just embracing the fact that I don't really, if you, and Lesley-Ann, you don't have a preconception as to how something gets finished, genuinely open to how the thing might end itself. But if you have any preconceptions about how a thing looks when it's done, it's just a restriction, and anything's worthwhile trying because it might find a home somewhere else. I kind of feel that way about, I know that's in a stretcher and you've kind of tacked a frame around it, but that could easily be a painting that in 6 months' time, if it was still on the studio floor, was a part of something else,
Yeah.
It was just a swatch of something in something bigger, or a section of it were cut out,
Yeah.
I remember feeling so stupid when I was in my 30s or something, and I realised I can do it whatever way I want to. And it was like, I have a master's degree, why didn't I work that out before? And it's all these things that you don't give yourself permission to do, because we're inclined to restrict the way we think about everything, Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.